Former First Lady Melania Trump contradicted her husband on abortion. In a video posted on her X account, she said there is no room for compromise when it comes to a woman's individual freedom. Take a look.
Individual freedom is a fundamental principle that I safeguard. Without a doubt, there is no room for compromise when it comes to this essential right that all women possess from birth: individual freedom. What does my body, my choice really mean?
The First Lady released the video following The Guardian leaking excerpts Thursday of her forthcoming book titled Melania, in which she defends women's rights.
Her position is at odds to Trump's, who has voiced support for restrictions on abortion. Trump touts the Supreme Court ruling that overturned Roe v. Wade, which provided protection for abortion nationally. It led to the enactment of severe restrictions on the procedure in mostly Republican-led states. It should be noted that the former president has said he would veto a federal abortion ban if he is elected again, and that the issue should be left up to the states to legislate.
So Melania is a pro-choice individual, I guess. That's not so surprising necessarily to me. Look, I don't know that it's that big. Couples disagree on various axes of policy. She's not required to agree with everything Donald Trump thinks. I suspect she actually agrees with very little that Donald Trump thinks, would just be my guess. She's not a particularly political person, although she has written this book, which, you know, kind of drags her into the spotlight, the limelight a little bit in terms of politics, despite her claiming to kind of just want her privacy. I don't know. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I guess I'm not that surprised by it either. I mean, she's a model. She ran in a lot of Hollywood-esque circles, which tend to be more liberal. I don't think it's all that surprising. I mean, even Trump himself has some more traditionally liberal positions than what you would typically find in the Republican Party.
Right. I don't know that deep down in his heart of hearts he's actually pro-life.
He
knows that it's a strategic, that to be the Republican leader, he has to be pro-life.
Can I just run through a timeline of his stances on abortions over the years? I'm going to jump over a few years. October of 1999, quote, "I'm very pro-choice." February 2011, "I'm pro-life." 2015, August, divided over defunding Planned Parenthood. February 2016 says he'll defund Planned Parenthood while also praising the group. In March of 2016, some form of punishment for women who seek abortions. October 2016, vows to overturn Roe v. Wade. 2017, January, nominates Neil Gorsuch, of course. Then he supports the 20-week abortion in October 2017. And then in January through May of 2018, he advocates for a 20-week abortion ban. Then nominates Brett Kavanaugh, confirms Amy Coney Barrett. And then in 2022, in June, says, God made the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. After the midterm losses in 2022, he blames Republicans and McConnell for not handling abortion properly. And then in September 2023, makes vague promises about an abortion compromise. Then in this year, February through March, flirts with the idea of the national abortion ban, then won't answer in April about the 6-week abortion ban, and then says in April we should go back to the states.
Other than the initial changing of his mind about he was pro-choice and then became pro-life, which, you know, people change their mind about policy issues. It does happen. It could be sincere. I don't know. I'm not claiming that it isn't a sincere change. But other than him changing his literal position on abortion itself, I don't know that there's that much in there that actually is a contradiction. Like, you can think that it is important to overturn Roe v. Wade, or that Roe v. Wade was a wrongly decided Supreme Court decision. I actually happen to think it's not a particularly solid decision, because I don't think this right is enshrined in the Constitution. You can think that changing that was important, but then it ought to be left up to the states to decide, and there should not be a federal abortion policy, and that once put under state control, something in that middle 6 is too early, 20 is too late. Somewhere in there will be a good policy, but the states can decide. I don't know. That seems to be where most Americans are, actually.
Yeah, I mean, if you poll Americans, most of them say they want some restrictions on abortion. Most of them usually fall around the 15-week mark. That's pretty consistent. And I mean, I think, to be fair, if we're playing both sides here, it's not like Democrats have really indicated what restrictions, if any, they would support. I mean, Tim Walz was asked this during the vice presidential debate, and he didn't answer whether or not he would support any restrictions. I mean, I wish they would just say, yeah, no restrictions, you can have an abortion whenever you want for whatever reason.
That's not how most Democrats
Well, then they should say it,
I
right?
think every Democrat has a different interpretation, because there's other stuff happening too. So it's not just the restrictive abortion laws that are occurring in multiple states, Florida being extremely restrictive, Texas as well. It's that it's a package deal with defunding women's clinics. Planned Parenthood was on the chopping block first. Women can't get appointments now with their OBGYN in time to know that they're pregnant, so they get their pregnancy test that's sometimes 6-8 weeks in, maybe even longer. Then after that, you have to get an appointment for an abortion if they're still available, if it's rape, incest, whatever the laws are. So suddenly, no woman wants to have an abortion at 22 weeks. No woman wants to have an abortion at 30, 40, whatever weeks. And when that does happen, it's most likely, unless you're being delayed because you don't have access to health care in your state because it's being defunded, it's usually because there's a risk to the woman. And so I think most Democrats traditionally have said rape and incest and ectopic pregnancies, when the woman's life and the baby's life are at risk, should not be on the table at all. Sometimes there's a question over how many weeks, but we have to keep in mind these delays because of women's health are affecting when women get abortions now. And it's not the traditional conversation anymore.
But wouldn't the response to that be funding more healthcare clinics and making sure people have access, as opposed to changing the standard of what week you think people should be able to have an abortion at, right?
It would be, but these are Republican-led legislatures that are cutting the access to funding. I think the fights are happening on both levels.
I think
Go ahead.
Well, I would say that there is a legitimate moral objection to funding clinics that provide abortions, and people have issues with their taxpayer dollars going to things that they morally object to, right? And when you do look at the difference between, let's say, Planned Parenthood and pro-life crisis pregnancy centers that don't provide abortions, there are significantly more crisis pregnancy centers, including in low-income areas, that all women have access to. So I think the idea that you're defunding women's health because you don't want to pay for abortions is a little bit of a misinterpretation.
My idea, because I also don't want to see on any subject American tax dollars spent on things that, your tax dollars spent on something you don't believe in. So
churches?
I don't want. Well, what do you mean by
tax
that?
relief in the Catholic?
I don't.
We subsidize churches.
By not taxing them?
Yeah, by not taxing
I don't want to tax anyone.
Yeah.
I want to erase all taxes. So the crime is not that they're not being taxed; it's that other people are being taxed. But I don't think church should be. I don't think a religious institution should be, subsidized or something of that nature. My solution would be, instead of funding for abortion centers or something like that, I do want to make it easier for people to get whatever the government does to stand in the way of women having more reproductive health choices before the abortion conversation has to come in terms of birth control and contraceptives and all of those things. I would get the government out of the way of that, make it easier for people to plan accordingly, so that we end up doing fewer abortions because it just doesn't come into play as much. If we can medically, technologically, with innovation, with free and easier choices, make it so that's not even on the table, I think that's better.
I hear you, and I think we should just fund all around. I think we should be funding support and education for planned pregnancies, but not, the majority of abortions are not just unplanned pregnancies. I mean, of course, there is rape and incest, and that's something that you can't condom your way into. A lot of abortions happen within marriages.
Well, we should prosecute rapists.
We should. Sometimes women are taking antibiotic and their birth control doesn't work. I mean, there's so many factors at play here that we just have to keep in mind, that's why this has to be on the table. And a lot of women have abortions because, they can't afford to have the child and they weren't planning it and there was an accident. Accidents happen. We're humans at the end of the day. So we should be providing all sorts of scenarios, funding for all of it. And frankly, at the end of the day, I just think it's because some conservatives, I'm not saying you, some conservatives in the party have other agendas to really keep women as birth incubators.
We'll be back with more Rising right after this.